All right. This last plenary is called Prevention Through Policy and Youth Empowerment. Policy has become a really important word to me because I have seen people with great intentions go and study, learn, soak it all in, and then when they go back, they don't have a structure for implementation. Policy provides structure. Come on up and make a new friend. The back row is not open. Might as well come on up, make a friend. We've got lots of seats here. I'm going to call everybody out that tries to sit in the back row. You guys, okay? Yeah, everybody's good with that? All right. For those of you at home watching this virtually, get just a little closer. Policy, when you leave here, I don't want you to take home a bunch of ideas. I don't want you to just be inspired. I want you to think about implementation. So our last plenary is about prevention through policy and empowerment, youth empowerment. And I'm going to start off with Dareen Khatib. Dareen has become like a mentor for me. I have learned so much about what it means to do prevention in California and what are the legislative policies that are the structure I can hang my projects and programs on. And Dareen is the Administrator of Health and Wellness at the Orange County Department of Education, where she oversees supports for comprehensive health education, including sexual health education and alcohol, tobacco, and other drug prevention. It doesn't mention donuts and Danishes, but those are addiction, yeah. We need to add that. Physical education. She has served as the director of the statewide health education framework rollout and implementation project and is currently co-chair for the California Health Education Community of Practice. With over 20 years of experience in education, Dareen is a passionate health advocate who firmly believes that healthy students are better learners with improved college career and life readiness. So please give it up for Dareen. And all of you coming in right now, the back row is not open. The back row is not open. The other members of the panel include our own very, very highly esteemed adjunct professor Ruthie Hanchett, who also is a member of the Fullerton School Board of Trustees. Read her bio. She's a frequent flyer here. I also want to especially introduce Michaela Brass, a recent sociology graduate of Vanguard University, former president of Live to Free. She has the Vanguard Anti-Human Trafficking Certificate from the Global Center for Women and Justice. She has minors in cultural anthropology and religion. She has served as a research assistant. She has traveled to Ensure Justice Navajo Nation. Can I hear it from AIC? Yes. And it doesn't say it here. She is a PhD student for, tell me what university? University of Buffalo. So she's just graduated. She's already accepted into the PhD for Buffalo University, right? I'm not proud at all, right? Okay, this is great. We have really important questions now to talk about in this last hour. And I do want you to start, Darlene, by framing what this looks like in Orange County for prevention. Oh, you have them. Will you pass out the microphones, Ruthie?
Out there,
Slide Angel. There he is.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. So I'm going to start by just sharing a little bit about what legislation we do have in California and kind of viewing the legislation as an opportunity. It's not the end-all be-all, but it is an opportunity. So how many of you have heard of the California Healthy Youth Act? We have a few school-based folks who have heard about. How many have heard some drama around California Healthy Youth Act? Okay, now more people are remembering. So the California Healthy Youth Act has passed. It passed in 2016. So starting January 2016, schools are required to teach comprehensive sexual health education at least one time in middle school and again at least one time in high school. This isn't necessarily new. We've been teaching HIV and AIDS education. The law has been around for quite a while, and it's been happening for quite a while. But what the 2016 law did was it updated that content. So it's not enough to talk to students about sexually transmitted infections, and it's not enough just to cover the consequences of unsafe sexual experiences. We have to do more than that. So it added a lot more content. And then we did have in 2017, we had legislation that separately was mandating that educators are trained around human trafficking and that students receive education around human trafficking. So what they did basically was they amended the California Healthy Youth Act, and they were like, we're going to add that requirement under the California Healthy Youth Act. And I just want to pause because Ruthie and I were talking yesterday, and she was saying, don't forget to mention, because we do have a lot of misinformation around comprehensive sexual health. People think sexual health, and they hear, I think for shorthand, people will say sex ed, right? Which kind of makes me twitch a little bit, because we're not teaching kids how to have sex. So for the record, sexual health education is not graphic, it's not pornographic, it's not a technique class, it's not a how-to class. We are teaching students knowledge and skills. It is to protect their health. And we have so much research that shows that when students receive comprehensive sexual health education, they have better health outcomes. They're actually more likely to delay the first time they have intercourse. When they do, they're more likely to use protection. They're less likely to have a teen pregnancy. We have so many protective factors that we know are a result. But a lot of time there's misinformation. We'll have parents who might think that if you expose students to content, like if you talk about sex in any content, they're going to do it. It's kind of like don't say anything about drugs because they're going to try it. But, in this day and age with social media and exposure to information, what information they're getting and how to interpret that information and how to apply that information is the most important thing. And that is the job of educators. So I just want to highlight a couple of things because, and the reason why I bring this up that Ruthie and I were talking about is, if you're an advocate for human trafficking, you're an advocate for this comprehensive sexual health education because it's all coming in together, right? We've been having really great conversations with a lot of leaders in the room about the fact that all of these issues are not siloed. When we talk about different aspects, comprehensive sexual health education has a lot of content around healthy relationships. It has a lot of content around help-seeking behavior, how to ask for help. So I'm going to just kind of go through a couple of things to ground us. So when you hear about this out in the community, if you're trying to work in schools, the more you know, the more that this could be a door for you to say, oh, I heard you have to do this anyway. So how about we support you? How about we help you? How about we enhance what it is that you have to do? Because that's what schools need. So if we go to the next slide, I have some really boring ed code slides, but I just wanted to make sure that we're all grounded in the fact that California law makes sure that the information that is passed on is age appropriate, medically accurate. It's not supposed to be biased. It's not supposed to gear towards, you can't just go abstinence only and have any kind of religious connotation, right? So that would not be appropriate. That it also has to be age appropriate. So we can't go into too much depth for a 7th grader. We want to get a little bit more sophisticated for a 9th grader. So the idea of age appropriate is actually also defined in the legislation. It has to be medically accurate, and the legislation actually says what is considered medically accurate. Because we had local medical, pediatricians with differing opinion than the, CDC. Well, it can't really be like, well, my cousin said, that doesn't really work. So there's a lot, I'm saying all that to say there's a lot of protection around the content that is being delivered. We're trying to build knowledge and skills because we want students to do something with this information, not just be like, well, that was a fun fact, I now know the symptoms of gonorrhea. Okay, let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to go briefly through some boring stuff, but I want to point out that the purpose is we really want to make sure that we want to protect the health of students, their sexual and reproductive health, but there's a lot of emphasis on developing healthy attitudes. Even the whole idea of like healthy body image, understanding that sexuality and our development, our growth and development, it's part of normal human development. And respecting the fact that that development looks different in different people, and it's expressed differently in different people, and development, it's not linear for everyone. We want to integrate this into what we're teaching. So integration is like opportunities for students to maybe work on a project, to maybe connect with Live to Free, or connect with other opportunities like Higher Ground, to connect with other organizations that could enhance that instruction. And then the stuff in the dark orange, it's not supposed to be red, nobody panic, but this one is really like a really great addition. The idea of healthy, positive, and safe relationships. When we talk about healthy relationships or unhealthy relationships, we're talking about physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, and actually talking about what that might look like for students. So the application of that is really big. So I want you to kind of start thinking about where do you see the connection between what we're talking about with human trafficking prevention education and where the law is emphasizing the goal here. If we go to the next one. Some boring stuff, but I wanted to mention that there is how we teach this is important. We talked a little bit about LGBTQ youth being at risk and making sure that we are allowing students to see themselves in the education that they're receiving. So making sure that we're affirmatively recognizing that people have different sexual orientation, they might have different gender identities, they might express their gender in different ways, and to be respectful of that, and to be affirming of that, and to create a safe space. This isn't about my personal values as an educator. We don't do that in public schools. Your personal values are your personal values. But I gotta walk in and say, I believe this, and you, my students, should believe what I believe. We want to make sure that it's a space for all students to see themselves in the education that they receive. And then the other one I'll point out is the trusted adult piece. The legislation requires that the education includes that students speak to a trusted adult. Is that always the person at home? The adult at home? No, right? That could be whoever's teaching. That could be the counselor. That could be the custodian. That could be the front office person. That could be someone in their neighborhood. That could be someone at their community center. That could be someone, it could be their friend. It could be a peer. We want to make sure that, well, the trusted adult piece is important. But who they talk to could differ, right? But I want to emphasize adult because we also want to build their ability to talk about values. So if their value-based question does come up, the goal is to say, talk to a parent or a guardian or a trusted adult about that, right? Because everybody has different values. So I bring this a lot up again because if you do hear about opposition to comprehensive sexual health, if it doesn't fit into a certain value system, we're not teaching value systems. We leave that to the families. And if the student doesn't come from a family where they're able to have that safe conversation, we're telling them to connect with a trusted adult. So, and if they don't have a trusted adult, then there's a conversation where the teacher could then facilitate, well, let's get you a trusted adult, because that's also an opportunity. Okay, the next slide is just pointing out that the required content, this is very, very abbreviated. They do have to teach a lot. So this is where, unfortunately, we don't have a semester long to talk about this. So there's always this competition for instructional time. They do have to cover a lot of content. But part of that content that is required is sexual harassment, assault, abuse, and human trafficking. They have to cover that in the content that they're teaching. Remember, one time in, when do they have to teach this? One time in middle school and one time in high school. So it needs to be repeated, and hopefully it's a little bit more sophisticated and a little bit more in depth. Maybe there's an amazing partnership with the community, that organization that can bring in someone with lived experience to speak. There's so many opportunities to enrich this dialogue and to really make it something that is skill-based for students and applicable for students, and gives them this opportunity to speak up, feel safe that I could actually say something, or realize that maybe they are in a situation where they need to say something, or it's their peer, or it's a family member. I think that was the last slide. Hopefully I did not make the mistake of another slide.
All right, so you have a very concise and abbreviated version of the legislative framework. That's policy. And we have almost 500,000 students in Orange County, 29 school districts. I thought it was 28. One thing I learned this week, it's 29. And while there is no way I could teach all of that content, if you think of it as what are my values and my expertise, as a Venn diagram, there are places I can come alongside my public school in my area with my resources. Like Michaela Brass, Live to Free president, taking students to a high school in Santa Ana. She didn't have to teach all of that. That is the structure that we can overlap. And how do we, as a community then, empower youth to make good decisions, and by good I mean healthy decisions. So I want to go to Ruthie right now about how do we empower our youth? You're a master of youth empowerment.
I'm learning. Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, I love that we do have this opportunity through this comprehensive sexual health education to empower young people with information, because developmentally appropriate information and knowledge is protective. And as you talked about, it creates an opportunity for noticing when kids don't have a safe adult and don't have a safe place to go, and it could be a chance to identify a kid that needs help and support. So I love that. We're talking about policy, but policy can be both laws. It can also be describe the approaches we use. It can be the way, the lens through which we see things, the approaches we use when we respond to challenges or goals, right? So I want to talk about the approach, the policy of youth empowerment. So my definition for youth empowerment is about a process and a goal of supporting young people to recognize their own agency and have the experience of their ability to affect change in their own lives and their community. We began this conference when Kathy Gibbons talked to us about saying, you know, we want to be a voice for the voiceless, but those survivors always had a voice, right? They had a voice when they were vulnerable kids. They still have a voice, and we just weren't listening. And so I see youth empowerment as handing the mic over, of creating a platform and a space so we can listen well. It's noticing the value and the contribution that young people bring to this effort and giving them the microphone to amplify their voice. And it's a partnership. It's really about adults and young people working together. And it's about recognizing the strengths and the insights that young people bring to the conversation. The fact that we will not be effective at fighting human trafficking or protecting young children from exploitation unless we empower and engage them, unless we give them the information and give them spaces for their voices to be used and heard and responded to. We need their input, their insight, and their partnership. It's recognizing and respecting that adults and young people, kids from very young ages all the way through teens and youth, have something really valuable to contribute. that they have something to bring to the table that we will be missing if we don't create space for them at the table. Literally, that interdependence and making space and making sure it's inclusive. That we're looking at power dynamics to ensure that everyone is welcome and asked, and that we're accommodating and even changing things up so that they are comfortable and able to have equal power at that place. So to me, this idea of youth empowerment really comes from the policy that it comes out of is really from the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So in 1989, the United Nations signed the UN CRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and within that there is a Article 12, which outlines the international law, the right of children to participate. And it talks about the voice of the child. The right of the child in Article 12 is the right to express their views, influence decision-making, and achieve change in matters that affect them. We have heard throughout this conference that children and youth are affected by human trafficking. They are both vulnerable and victims, but they are also powerful advocates and able to make a difference in this fight. So we need to look at how we can both include them and engage them, listen to their right to participate in this effort. And when we do that, it's both preventative as well as protective. And it looks like part of the way that we do that is we are actually in that process building young people's assets, building protective measures around them. So when young people are engaged in this fight and when they are part of becoming empowered and advocates, expressing their right to the participation, they build life skills like self-efficacy, the ability to speak up for your voice and create change. They build self-confidence. They build pro-democratic behaviors, the community engagement and civic engagement. And these are really important skills that we want from our youth and our communities. It's also protective for them. They're less likely to be vulnerable to traffickers and people who would exploit them when they have these internal assets. Public speaking, planning events, getting involved, networking with other adults, safe adults in that process. So it improves their life outcomes when we engage and empower young people. But it also improves our approaches to human trafficking. I personally have been witness to children as advocates that have more power in a room to change the conversation than any adult when they're listened to. I've seen young people take the lead on things like creating fair trade fashion shows and creating films that really have insight and value that are just different when peers are talking to peers and when young people are engaged in the process. So it's really important that they are part of that process if we want to be effective at both protecting as well as engaging them as partners in this work. And the other thing I want to share is that it's absolutely important that it's experiential for youth empowerment. Young people need to know that their voice matters and have a positive experience in that. And the more they do it, I see some head shaking, the more they do it, the more they want to engage in that again, right? When they feel the confidence of what that means, to know that they made a difference, to know that their voice was heard, or that they made a difference for even their friend, it inspires them to do more. So we have to give them experiences, not just talk about it or learn about it from a kind of a more academic standpoint. I want to quickly go to the next slide and talk about what it looks like then to create an environment that's enabling for youth empowerment. Because while participation for young people, for children and youth is a right, it's a basic human right, it's not a gift or a privilege that adults give to young people, but we have to create an environment that both respects and empowers them to do that. Especially when we're talking about younger people, they oftentimes need support to do that well, right? So there's a model that comes from Professor Laura Lundy of Queen's University in Belfast, where she talks about 4 elements that are needed to ensure that right of children to participate. She says that we have to look at space, that it's inclusive, that young people's views are considered freely. We're asking who's not included, which children are we asking to the table, looking at barriers, whether it's disabilities or language or immigration status, gender identity, who are we listening to and inviting into the conversations. We have to look at voice and how we are providing information in order for young people to be engaged in a way that they're informed and able to make then informed and even consensual contributions to the conversation. We have to look at influence. Are we taking young people's voices seriously? Does it have the power to change things? And a lot of that has to do then with the audience. Are the people with the ability to change things in the room? are the people with power listening to the youth and engaging with them as partners. And when we consider all these 4 elements, and maybe that's a way of thinking about your own policies and your organization, structures that you have, when we have all of these 4 elements in place, that's when we begin to see the benefits of youth engagement and empowerment as they shape and influence the policies of a large organization, and we create a partnership between adults and young people. I think we're going to go on to some lessons on how to create these spaces. So
let me ask Michaela a question. Michaela, you are a brand new grad, and as you experience being an undergrad student and even go back to high school, how did you, first of all, experience where policy helped or hindered in your journey to give you access? I really want to keep those 4 spaces up for a while, because that framework, that policy is something that Ruthie has really established in the implementation of our Live to Free program.
Yeah, places where policy helped, I could think of like really 2 big ones, which was the Crown Act, which is creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. I know like hair is something that's like, oh, why does that matter? But for me being a black girl, one thing that they're going to see is my skin, and then another thing they're going to see is my hair. And just ending that race-based hair discrimination, which at a point impacted black women's employment opportunities and professional advancements, both socially and economically. I feel like having that policy in place really encouraged black women and me and myself that I can do all things. Like, I can show myself through my education. They're not just looking at me from my hair and from what I'm wearing, but they're actually wanting to know about my personality and other things. So, another policy, I believe, is the Initiative on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Black Americans. And that just happened recently while I was in my junior year of college. And I really was like encouraged from that policy because it provided platforms for youth of color to both accelerate learning and development and success within like technology and education. I think that is so important because there's so many obstacles in our ways that just hinder us from wanting to reach that. And it really emphasized community relationships, which me being from Compton wasn't really seen as much. But now that that policy is instated, you can see it now. So.
Okay, so I just have learned so much from you. So you guys all know, this is like a sidebar here, that mentoring is not a one-way street. And so Michaela has been part of my life and has mentored me. Honestly, I didn't know what the Crown Act was. I thought it was something they did in Great Britain. But I learned, and it's really changed my attitudes. And so when I first came back from Greece and we started the Live to Free Club at Vanguard, and I'm looking at Alicia, who was from that early season, I was really good at giving my students opportunity and content. But it was very two-dimensional, that's all. And then Ruthie came into my life with this other model, and she told me I couldn't give them a PowerPoint to present. They had to develop their own. Well, I was afraid of that. What if they got it wrong? Ruthie taught me about youth empowerment and trust, and giving them the space to get it wrong and to fix it. Would you talk about that kind of youth empowerment that creates space and builds trust?
Yeah, and we can go to the next slide because a few of these points are on it. I think that, there's a lot in that. But we do want to invest in young people. And you think about child development and parenting, right? You have to give kids opportunities, and sometimes they amaze you, and sometimes they stumble a little bit. But I think as a coach, what I've learned is you want to, as much as you can, give them opportunities to fall in, I say, like safe places to fall, right? And so it's, you create maybe those bumpers like in bowling alleys, right? They can't fail too hard, but it's okay for them to develop some experiences of grit and picking yourself back up. And maybe if I had done it differently, maybe next time we'll try this instead. And that's the role of a coach. I mean, that's what a good parent does too, right? Is you say, okay, what can we do differently? Help you reflect on the learning and the experiences that you have. And, but also I think it's always like never giving up and seeing the value and the strengths that person has. And so that's one of the other things I've discovered is how critical it is to be it's a maximizer. It's one of those strengths finder words, right? It's like the number one strength is maximizer. Seeing the good in someone and drawing it out and emphasizing it and building it, because it's those positive experiences that get young people wanting to try more. And you build the esteem of that person, but also the strength of your team if you're working with a group of young people, when you can see that great thing that they're good at and build more and more experiences for them to shine. And so I think even in times where we maybe stumble, we can find beautiful things about it, things that did go well, and how do we keep building on that and learn and move on from the things that are hard. And it's a dance. And I said, in my workshop earlier today that sometimes we have to let other adults too know that their expectations of the way it's going to look if they were in charge may be different when young people are in charge, but that's part of the process too. And so letting go of adult expectations is important, and sometimes we can be totally blown away and just so impressed with what young people are able to do when we give them the freedom to have that space. So I don't know, Michaela, you have any examples of that?
About the Fair Trade Fashion Show where I came to a thing, I was like, I want to do a theme. I want to talk about the economic injustice within communities of color. And she's like, okay, do some research, bring it back to me, and we'll work on it together. And she could have easily said, let's not do a theme, let's just focus on regular labor trafficking overall and all that stuff. But her allowing me to have that leadership and bring in different people of color who are doing things within the labor trafficking movement in positive ways, and bringing that to the school meant so much to me and so much to other students of colors that were attending. So, yeah.
I think it was the best Fair Trade Fashion Show ever.
Actually, if you have never been to the Live to Free Fair Trade Fashion Show, it's every October. Watch our calendar so you don't miss it. And it is part of a structure, so we have some structure, but then it is student-led. Go ahead. Okay, so I have a question for you. Michaela, how did Ruthie increase your courage and confidence to really fly solo?
I think she created a space where it was very inclusive, where she was asking questions like, okay, is this right? Or how do you feel about this situation? She just really kept up to date with me. And she really encouraged a space where it was really respectful, in the sense like knowing that I was a Black American, or I am a Black American, and that my experience might be different from others. She took these like various ways to approach me on how to do like certain topics and how to approach certain people within human trafficking, things like that. So.
Okay, before you guys go back here, I have to go to Doreen. Doreen, Department of Education and OC Human Trafficking Task Force did an event. It was hosted at Cal State Fullerton, had almost 400 middle school kids. How did that fit your policy, your role as a prevention leader?
Well, all credit goes to the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force, and really just working so hard on putting that student-focused, student-centered event on. I really, for us in K-12 or preschool to 12th grade, a lot of what you're describing is a huge emphasis, right? The application of the learning is the goal. Old school teacher holds all the information, or the expert, right? I'm also looking at some of our amazing school nurses in the house who are also amazing teachers in the classroom as well, counselors, social workers, whoever it is, whoever the expert is standing there. That old school approach of I hold the information and I'm going to give it to you and you need to take notes and then I'm going to quiz you on that so that you could retain that information and then we're going to walk away. Sometimes the person in the room, a young person, doesn't matter how old, might have access to better information than the person in the front of the room, right? We could all agree to that, right? Access to information, we all have access to information. So what we're trying to teach students in K-12, preschool to 12, I keep saying K, but now it's transitional kindergarten, but really also we start in preschools, is to teach students the skills they need on how to find information. Are you accessing valid information? Is that a credible source of information? Let me help you navigate that. Like, we're facilitators of learning. That's really the big goal. More and more, we want students to figure out how to find the information, explore that information. Now let's interpret that information. So what? Now what? How does that influence you? What about it? What are we going to do with it? And then for my work is really all around health education. And for us, the health education world, we're trying to also get students to realize what is influencing me, my health behaviors, what are some internal influences, what are some potential external influences, where am I getting information that is impacting my health? Like, and let me actually assess, is that a good source of information? Are we helping with that kind of investigation? Are we teaching that in the classroom? And as we kind of go up a little bit, and we call it a ladder, right? As we get more sophisticated in the skill development, we're increasing health literacy. We're creating more literacy. But specific to health content, you're also asking, what are my decision-making processes? Like, how do I make my decisions? How do I make a decision? A lot of times we tell students, go make good decisions. All right, cool. What is that going to just come from the heavens and fall on top of my head? We have to teach them how to do that. How do you goal set? So now that you've realized that maybe you want to shift some behaviors, well, then how do I goal set? How do I track that? And what if I mess up? Well, how do I keep moving forward? How do I practice all these healthy behaviors you keep telling me to practice? Okay, so we just talked about healthy relationships and red flags, and all right, so let's actually practice what it looks like to communicate that, no, I don't want to do that, I don't feel comfortable, I'm not ready. Let's actually practice that. It's one thing to hear it, but that's great, because now I'm in a situation, I don't feel confident, I've never actually uttered those words, so I'm not going to really do it. Have we practiced that? Schools are a safe place. Schools are a safe place, and imagine practicing as a 4th grader, as a 5th grader, as an 8th grader, as an 11th grader. As the practice gets more sophisticated, you're gaining more confidence, you're gaining more skills, the skills are improving, you're building. It's not the first time you've ever heard about goal setting in, 9th grade or decision making or, what healthy behaviors look like. You've learned some, and now we're just layering on. And I bring all that up to say that at the top of our skill building for health education is health promotion. And that's the advocacy piece, is empowering students to advocate for their own health, the health of their peers, the health of their families, and the health of their communities. What does that advocacy look like? And a lot of times we stop with the teaching in the classroom, but we all know that learning cements when there's an experience, when there's an application. And an event like what took place at Cal State Fullerton was such a great example of that, to be able to experience the learning. There was some essential concepts. We call, the very, very bottom is like information. We call them essential concepts. Yes, we do want to teach you some things. There are some things you need to know, but then that's the bottom. Okay, so I learned some things, now what? I get to interact with other people. I get to engage with community partners. I get to actually be exposed to different projects and different opportunities. We don't have equitable opportunities for all students across the county, across every school, let alone across the state and across the nation. So the question becomes, are we creating opportunities for more and more students to deepen the learning, take it from just the basic information we just gave you to all the way up to, I got to like scaffold all those skills and I got to actually participate in the application and the advocacy. I got to teach others. That's how learning cements, right? That's the best form of maintaining and retaining some of that learning. So all of that culminates, and I think those opportunities, like the event in Cal State Fullerton is a great example. Everything that Live to Free does. I know Higher Ground is in the room, all the work that they do with bringing young students to come in and present to middle schoolers about this content. Those are all great opportunities for engagement, for students to actually think about what the content means as far as the real world outside the class.
So, I'll go to you next, but Michaela, you were in the room. You got to present to these kids. You got to make a difference. And honestly, I looked at those kids when adults were standing up there, and they were kicking back and doing this. I mean, 8th graders, 7th graders, okay. But when the kids from Higher Ground or Live to Free were on the stage, they were just leaning forward. What did it mean to you? How did it empower you to empower them?
It empowered me in a lot of ways where that when they see someone like themselves up on the stage, they know that they are able to advance themselves and educate themselves in a variety of ways. And I actually have a slide that shows what student empowerment may look like for children of color. Yeah, so it was important that we all had empathy within speaking with them. We know like not everyone is open-hearted, but just understanding the experience and their history. And like Ruthie, she was like, you gotta know that some of these students may not have experienced some of the things that you feel is normal. And it's important to just come in with grace and understanding. So I thought that was really encouraging and helpful. And then just being affirming and appreciating after we got done speaking to the students, and usually within our other presentations, they come up and say thank you, and we're like, thank you, like we're learning so much from you and applying that within ourselves. And then we try to create an inclusive environment where we encourage respectful and equitable dialogue and encourage varied ways of communicating. So us showing that video of the other high school students really was encouraging and helpful. And then offering opportunities for resources where we showed them like, oh, you can go through shopping, or you can look and read at these different books and these different places on how to become advocates from such a young age. So, something.
Ruthie, you had one more comment before we open this for questions.
Okay. I want to speak to the difference between internal and external assets, because I was thinking about this and the way, back to that idea of creating the environment where young people are empowered, because what we saw was an example of giving young people the space to be the leaders, but unfortunately in our society that doesn't always happen, right? And young people will take leadership, but I've just been thinking about this idea that true power is the ability is when our no's are taken seriously. We can choose yes or no. And I grew up in like the purity movement and kind of a lot of assignment to choices we made. And it took me being an adult and realizing how few choices men and girls and boys and women have around the world about sexual health to realize you could say no, but if someone doesn't listen to your no, it doesn't matter, right? And you can say yes, but when your choices are not meaningful, when it's two bad choices, it doesn't matter. And so I think, when I think about empowerment, I want our young people to know that their yes means yes and their no means no, whatever avenue that looks like, whatever their life choices are. But it means that we also have to give them the ability to speak up and to respect what they say. And that process is both an internal process for the young people as well as an external process for our community to respect them and listen and take it seriously. That they can say these things without repercussion or fear or being undermined, that it's respected. And so I I don't know, I was just thinking, like, I love that we were talking about how we do this well with young people, but we also have to do this well in our community so that we are making space and listening to them when they speak up.
Ruthie, you've been a huge advocate in our community for the last few years about giving children language at a very young age. So we want to give them space, and they have rights, but many times they don't have the words to speak for themselves. Tell us how we can, in like 2 minutes, how we can fix that.
There's a video called Smart Mamas Save Kids that you can watch from Vanguard University. But yeah, I think it does start with having these conversations, using the language, giving our kids that muscle memory experience of knowing that they're the owners of their bodies and they're in control and they can say yes or no, giving them choices and respecting the choices that they make. And I mean, I do that with my girls from day one. I want to build that experience in them. And I want for my own daughters, and I want for my students to know deep in their bones, to know what it feels like to be loved unconditionally and to be respected always, so that if they're treated as if that isn't so, if someone disrespects them, that they know it right away and they know that they deserve better. And that their no is respected, their yes is respected. I want them to choose relationships with folks that give them that honor and dignity. And I think that's what empowerment looks like, and that's what we do to empower others.
And building some of that muscle is giving kids accurate language. And you guys all know I'm a grandma, I'm old, and I'm going to do something that I don't usually do publicly, but I know because of being a pediatric nurse that when children have been encouraged to use their voices and tell someone, they may have grown up using other language, and so they tell somebody from a different culture that's a teacher that somebody opened up their ding-a-ling, and the teacher doesn't know what that means. It's like, no, this is quiet time, no bells. So I want to challenge you to begin to make it okay with young moms. Teach your children the correct language. Do not be afraid. You can say hand and leg and elbow. So can you say vagina and penis? Because if a child goes to the school nurse and says something very vague, using whatever your family's special language is, they may not be heard. And then they go back and they say, wow, they told me to tell, and then nobody did anything. Okay, that's my PSA for today. Whew, I'll probably get some feedback.
We gotta give the adults those skills. Well, I find the adults are the ones that are like, oh, just bury me now. And it's like, no, it's okay, you'll live. Let's get, so when we do teacher trainings around comprehensive sexual health, we'll do a whole activity where it's like, just put down all the words on a chart paper or anything, like whether it's just a nickname or whatever, and get the giggles out. And then, okay, now let's move on.
Well, and I teach in church.
I know.
And when I use that,
But they're not bad words. You just said it.
yeah,
It's your
it's
analogy.
elbow, hand, yes. Ruthie, I know you're bursting at the seams.
You want me to say
No, I just want you to know that, yeah, there you go.
It's evolving.
The Smart Mamas Save Kids. If you don't know how to teach your kids, we do have content all ready for you to teach you. Smart Mamas Save Kids. It's on our
But can
website.
I just say, this is part of taking away the stigma from having these conversations. And, we keep it taboo, we keep it under the table, and it's just, it's not a healthy environment. You're all nodding, so that's good. If we get to laugh a little bit, let's laugh a little bit. We'll be okay.
Okay. You can add Slido questions. I do have one. And what about the fact that there are many schools that will allow parents to sign so that their children do not have to attend education classes. From a universal human rights perspective, you know, how I want Ruthie to answer the question, is that fair? Michaela, I want you to answer the question, what would it have been like if your parents didn't let you go to class? And from the legal policy perspective and of an administrator, what can we do to improve the accessibility? Ruthie.
I have to do some research. I don't know if there's a child right to comprehensive sexual health education, but there is to education. And so if we see that as an essential part of a holistic knowledge, I mean, children do need to know. But I think especially if we think about from a protective standpoint, it's so critical. So, I mean, I'm a big fan because I think for the kids, if the parents think their kids don't need to know yet, even if they're very well protected children, everyone else is going to benefit when we all know, and especially those that are most vulnerable. If home isn't a safe place, that school might be the one place they can find a trusted adult and have these conversations that people are willing to talk about. Or to even say, I mean, I've been in places where I know I'm one of the first adults to say, that's not okay. The way you were treated is not okay. And so kids need to hear that message, and that school, unfortunately, is oftentimes that first place.
I think for me, I think it is very needed within schools and parents to sign up for children to go there, because if they're not learning it in school, where else are they learning it at? In their communities, and
TikTok.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the positive or right ways to learn it, and then they're even more vulnerable in doing things that they're unsure of and aren't really knowing. So yeah,
That's what we tell parents, like, they're gonna learn it, so they're gonna learn it from someone else, or they're gonna learn it from, and if they're not in that class, they're gonna learn it from Billy in a completely different way. So it's up to you, but okay. But I just wanted to clarify, so for public education, you can't opt out of the education. The only opt-out is around sexual health. So there's no other content, because sexual health is a sensitive topic. The law does allow that. It's the law, the legislation says that you could only do a passive opt-out. That means the district has to send something home to tell families, your student is going to receive this education, this is what they're covering. You as a parent have a right to come and look at the materials that your student is going to, basically the education, the lessons and the activities. You come look at it. They have to give them at least 2 weeks before the instruction begins, because you need to give them enough time to make an informed decision. There is nothing wrong with that. If you as a parent feel like, I want to teach this to my kid, go for it. So that is also part of the transparency. It doesn't have to be, if the parent feels more comfortable because it is sensitive topics and because they feel very passionate about certain values that they want to make sure is integrated, go for it. That's fine. Then the school, the district says, you have to put that in writing. The district can't make it easy for opt-out because they don't want it to be a mistake. You know, parents get a lot of forms that they have to sign. If it's just another form, if you want your kid to get this really important education, or, you know, sign here, or you have to sign, we don't want to get it mixed up. If you reviewed, you don't want, it's okay, put it in writing, I do not want my child, this is their name, to get this education. And then by law, the school has to find a different alternative education. It can't be punitive. They'll figure something out where the student can participate in a different educational opportunity. That is A-okay. But I have to tell you, most districts, once families come and look at the materials, they're like, oh, this is it? Yeah, we're not teaching, you know, gender reassignment surgery to first graders like you heard from somebody down the street. We don't do that. Or, you know, oh, wait, there's no porn in here? Yeah, no, there is no porn in here. So once I'm making a big deal out of it, but we've had like grandmothers walk into county offices and be like, I heard there's porn in the materials. They're like,
That wasn't this round.
I know. So to make a long story short, most of them, once they review it, guess what? They want their child to get the education. Because there's a lot of misinformation. So sometimes the opt-out is because there's fear. And I heard horrible things, and I do not want that. Once they get the information, they are very likely, most opt-out percentages are like around 1%. So it's a very, very small number of opt-out. But it is their right if they want to opt out. And that is okay. There is no, we wouldn't also want students to feel bad that their parents decided that they didn't want them to have that education. That is okay. Transparency is the key when it comes to this information, and that honest conversation, and let's talk about it, and let's respect one another's views and values, but make sure that the families understand what the school is trying to do and what the education actually entails.
Thank you. And Ruthie, what's the web URL to find Smart Mamas Safe Kids?
It's on the GCWJ website.
Okay, we'll put it in the sketch
Yeah,
notes.
it's in our YouTube
Yeah.
folder of recordings.
Okay.
But I also, Doreen brought up the point of pornography, and we know the average age when now a child is accessing pornography is 11, and it's oftentimes, they Google a term and something pops up. If we don't have great filters as parents, it's important that we look at ways to prevent accidental exposure to pornography, but kids show other kids. I mean, just because you have it on your phone or your home tablet doesn't mean they don't go to someone else's house. And what's really disturbing about that is not only do we know it leads to addiction for boys and girls, but the pornography that they're seeing, which is where they're learning their sexual education right now, is not what we would consider healthy, respectful, loving relationships, right? And we see all kinds of truly sexual assault and abuse and violence and misogyny and racialized fetishes and things that we do not want our kids to be learning as behaviors that we want to see replicated, right? So I think that is really important for us as adults and parents to think about the importance of healthy relationships and approaches to these issues when, if we leave it to default, it's oftentimes pornography that is teaching our kids instead. So talking about the harms with our kids and why we don't choose to watch because it isn't helpful for us or for the people on the other side of the screen is really important.
Google search terms. One of the most common is teen sex, and it is teenagers looking for information about sex. I wish I had that stat with me. I only have time for one more question. How do we empower nonverbal kids to speak up and have proper language? This is tough.
Well, I'll just say for us as educators across the state, we are having conversations about the fact that there isn't equitable access for students in special education to this curriculum. And the publishers, the folks who write the lessons, are not even writing for that population. So the materials aren't even available. That is a huge gap. That is a big issue. I think we have one comprehensive curriculum that has been reviewed, and it's really weak. And there's another one that has a cost. Anyway, my point is that is a huge issue. And unfortunately, sometimes we'll do teacher trainings, but then the special education teachers are left out of those trainings, so they're not getting the information to bring it to students. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer. I want to say that it needs to be an intentional and a pause. What is our current practice? And there needs to be, and that has to happen at the district level, because every district has to look and see, how are we making sure our students in special education are receiving this very, very important education? And what are we using? Is it appropriate? Is it developmentally appropriate? Right? You can't just take the same materials from another classroom. And this is going to be my opportunity to just share a toolkit that just came out from Health and Human Services, from their OTIP Office on Trafficking in Persons, and it is for schools. It's for schools to create a protocol on, first of all, how to identify, but part of that is part of a protocol, like when this whole conversation is around policies, right? It elevates the practices, and it isn't just because you happen to be at a really cool school. Your school doesn't have as much. You just happen to be in a really great classroom with an awesome teacher who's going out of her way to do X, Y, Z to make sure that the information is applicable for all her students. So you just lucked out, but the other person didn't. Like that is not how we need to. All students, every student has the right to equitable, high quality education. So I'm saying all that to say we have a long way to go, but I think forcing districts to pause and say, wait, we don't have that. Okay, then move them to action, and then creating some kind of protocol that calls out, what do we do? What are we doing for prevention? What are we doing? Are we training everybody on identifying students who are at risk or might need additional support? Do we know what support is in the community so that when we do identify a student, we know what to do as far as like the handoff, the making sure that there is the continuity of support and that they are getting the services that they need? Those things need to be formalized. Otherwise, they come and go, and it's not consistent.
Okay, so our time is up, but I'm going to give up some of my closing time because there were a couple of questions about homeschooling. And homeschooling sometimes is related to values-based education. And so how do we help homeschooling parents have quality content in situations where they're not very open to, like, Ruthie's kids are in a public school in Fullerton, and she comes from a more conservative community. So how can we begin to be, I don't know exactly how to make it more accessible? Any ideas? Because now I'm worried about those kids who don't get to learn.
I mean, we do. I have presented to groups and shared a ton of resources and really encouraged them to explore the resources, make adaptations where you need to make adaptations that supports your teaching philosophy and your personal values and things like that. But I'm telling you, most of the resources out there are very, very benign. I mean, when we talk about transmission of disease, we just talk about like skin to skin. Yeah, we'll say like vaginal, anal, oral, but they don't even explain what? Like, half the time I'm reading, I'm like, are students just supposed to infer what all this means? Because educators are so mindful not to overstep, not to be too, just they're trying to be so mindful, respectful. They tend to say less than say more. So I'm saying all that to say there's plenty for parents to take and for them to assess. I think we need to all empower everyone to have these difficult conversations. Half the time they're just too embarrassed, so they just want to skip it and just be like, I hope everything works out for my kid. They're so uncomfortable. So I think the more conversations and exposure, more comfort, more likely to have those conversations with their teens. But there are resources and we share it with them, but we're not in the home to make sure that it's actually being delivered and how it's being delivered. So
but it is available.
It is absolutely
Okay.
available. And there's a whole, CHEP is a whole program for everybody that does homeschooling, and they're invited to come for like group opportunities and different educational experiences. So there's a whole support system around homeschooling in Orange County.
Okay, good. Ruthie, last remark.
There's a lot of great resources online. I love the website Educate 2, number 2, Empower, and lots of children's resource books that you can have these early conversations as parents with your kids. I mean, some of the best homeschooling families I know are ones that really know their kids and are able to have these ongoing dialogues and conversations wherever their kid is at developmentally. And I think that's the key, is just honing in on, having honest, open conversations all the way through from birth through, they're getting married and out of the house. But having those ongoing conversations and knowing your kid and knowing they can, and hopefully that they can know they can trust you no matter what, is the most important key here. And I just wanted to say to the question about like nonverbal expression of voice. Voice doesn't mean, literal words. It can be any expression of self. So there's some really great research, even by Lundy, who I mentioned with the model, with newborns, and listening to their voice of what they like. In the NICU, they like quiet lights and low sounds, So responding to the expressed desires of children, in whether it's a disability or an age, we can always listen to and take into account the child's desires as we make decisions in their best interest.